that the Senate race has tightened considerably. 10-point gain for Walsh. Just what's your reaction or your thoughts on these new numbers that are out today?
Yeah, so this poll basically shows 7 points separating Walsh and Daines, which was a big reversal, and it's actually within the margin of error of the poll. PPP is a Democratic polling firm, but it's actually got a pretty good track record of predicting races. It's one poll. It's against all the other polls we've seen so far that have shown double-digit leads. It either means two things. One, the poll is an outlier. It's not really a good reflection of reality. The other point is that the race is tightened, and I've always suspected the race was going to tighten all along, and with all the money that's been on the race, I would suspect the race is tightening.
Can you give us your thoughts on why you think it's tightening?
It could be a number of different things. It could be the fact that you're starting to have people start to tune in. They start to make choices. What's interesting is that Walsh has gained a little bit in the poll, but the real gainer is the undecided voters. And I think with all the ads that have been on air, with the attacks from both the Walsh campaign and the Daines campaign and the outside groups, I think people are getting a little bit more confused, and maybe as a result are starting to say, well, maybe I am undecided. There's more information out there to help me make decisions. What's interesting that I saw is that Republicans in particular seem to have increased their support of Walsh, which is interesting, and not really sure why.
That is interesting. Do you think that this will rejuvenate perhaps the Democratic base for Walsh?
Well, certainly the Democrats are out there, and the Walsh campaign is showing this poll, showing yes, the race is tightening, and it's important for them. Walsh had a good fundraising quarter. I mean, he's been outraised by the Daines campaign throughout, and the outside groups have come in supporting Daines at a heavy clip. But he had a good fundraising quarter, and what's important for the race is that this poll is going to be used by the Walsh people to help them raise additional money, to actually get the resources that they need to try to compete.
So it's basic, I mean, we're within the margin of error. Do you remember, is this sort of where we're at with Tester Rieberg at this point?
Tester Rieberg campaign throughout the entire race was within the margin of error throughout. So, and in fact, actually, there seemed to be little movement throughout the race. What's interesting here is if this poll is an accurate reflection of reality, we have seen substantial movement, which is somewhat surprising. So it'd be interesting to see what happens next. Is there another poll that comes out that shows that this poll is an accurate reflection of reality or not? I tend to have more confidence in numbers when we see more data points showing the same exact trend. So I am cautious to basically say, oh yeah, this is good for Walsh. The bad news in the poll for Walsh is this. If this is a referendum, if this election is a referendum, Barack Obama, he's in trouble because Obama only has a 37% approval rating. But Walsh is doing a little better than Obama, which suggests that there's something out there that people like about John Walsh that could help them make a decision and vote for Walsh, even if they don't like the Democratic Party, even if they don't like Barack Obama.
Okay. Any other questions you guys want to ask, or is there anything you want to make sure we cover?
Well, a couple things that I think are illustrative. One of the things that helped Tester win big time in 12 is that, number one, he had Republican crossover voters. Now, if this trend sticks, that's good for Walsh. The other thing that helped Tester win is that he did well among older voters, which Democrats have to do. So one of the things here is that Walsh is still behind among older voters. So what I would expect to see over the next few weeks and months is that an increase in concerted effort by the Walsh campaign to talk about things like Social Security and Medicare and try to make this election based upon national Republican policies that these older voters do not like. And if we start to see movement among those older voters, that's a sign the Walsh campaign is actually doing really well. If we see, however, Daines continue to lead among independents, Daines continue to do well among older voters, that tells me that Daines is in good position going into the fall and into November.
Okay. Do you think of anything else, John? You feel
That's good.
Got it? Cool.
What's
Thank
our
you.
next big poll that we're looking at?
What's our next big poll? Who knows?
Do you know?
Who knows? I mean, people have been in the field. I mean, I've got all kinds of research organizations that have been trying to get a hold of me for polls. I suspect you're going to see more polls in general. You're going to see more polls in general as we move forward, because as the race intensifies, more organizations get involved, more people are going to put in polls in there. Public policy polling will probably actually do more polling as well. Yeah. They did a fair number. I think they did 6 or 7 polls in the Tester Rieberg race, and they haven't. I think they've only done. I think this might be the second, maybe the third they've done in this race. So that should step up as well.
It feels like up until now, in a lot of ways, it's been well, Daines is gonna take it, you know, and then now suddenly it's like, oh, maybe we have a race here. You know?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, in fact, actually, a lot of national prognosticators have essentially written off the race, and in fact, you know, people like National Journal and other organizations, including people like Stu Rothenberg and Charlie Cook, you know, still basically show this as a pretty good probability of a Republican pickup. That could be changing. I've always thought that this race was going to tighten up. It should tighten up. I still think, and even public policy pollsters at the end say Daines is still in the driver's seat, and I would agree with that particular assessment. You have to understand, too, Daines is better known than Walsh, but really not that much more so.
Right.
I mean, he ran a House race, but there was a lot of clutter out there of that Senate race, so it was hard for him to get really, really well known. So both these candidates are still relatively unknown. Walsh is in a weird situation as an incumbent in that,
An appointed incumbent.
as an appointed incumbent, is that he's really doesn't have all the power of incumbency. And as a result, you know, he's still behind in that name recognition. So it looks like as people get to know John Walsh, there's something about there that's causing them to give pause and maybe not say, I'm going to vote for Walsh, but at least say, I'm undecided. And if the Walsh campaign can keep that up, then that's good for them. So there's a sign here between the fundraising quarter that Walsh had and the poll that maybe this race is indeed tightening up as we start to move into what's going to be a more intensive fall with more advertising. Because we're still in the dog days of the summer, where a lot of Montanans, I came back, you know, on Sunday, and I'm like, where is everybody? I think everyone's out in the woods, where I had been. So I think as people start to tune in a little bit more and we get more polls, we'll be better able to see whether this poll is actually reflective of reality.